Welcome to Shatter.
Help me reach 5,000 subscribers. Support the video with a like and leave your thoughts in the comments. She looked me straight in the eye and said the words that should have shattered me. I'm not in love with you. I didn't flinch. I didn't ask why. I didn't beg. I just nodded once and told her, "Thanks for being honest." She blinked, like she expected anger or tears, maybe a desperate plea for her to reconsider. But she got nothing, just silence and a calm smile. That night, the house was still. She scrolled on her phone in bed, waiting for me to break the silence, to ask if she meant it, to fight for scraps of her affection. I didn't. I lay there with my eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling, breathing steady. By morning, every trace of the man she thought she knew, the flowers, the surprises, the affection, was gone. And with it, her smile vanished too. I brewed coffee only for myself, not for her. I didn't leave a note on the counter like I used to. No kiss on the forehead before I left for work. No have a good day. Just the sound of my car pulling out of the driveway while she stood in the kitchen in her robe, waiting for the version of me who no longer existed. At the office, people noticed I was sharper than usual. Focused. I didn't scroll through her pictures on my lunch break. I didn't check in to see if she needed anything. My phone stayed face down, silent. It was the first time in years I'd felt like I wasn't chained to someone else's moods. When I came home that evening, she was waiting, arms crossed, pretending not to care. The takeout boxes on the counter told me she hadn't cooked, not that I expected her to. She asked where I'd been. I told her I'd been out. With who? Just people. That one word hit her harder than any argument could. She froze for a moment, searching my face for answers, but I gave her nothing. I picked up the containers she left behind, cleaned the counter, and poured myself a glass of water. Not hers. Not ours. Mine. She followed me with her eyes, like a hunter suddenly realizing the prey wasn't running anymore. And for the first time in a long time, she looked nervous. That night, I went upstairs early. Didn't wait for her. Didn't talk. Just closed the door behind me, leaving her alone in the living room with her silence. I lay in bed, calm, detached, almost weightless. She came up later, slipped into her side without a word, and rolled away. The same routine. But something had changed. She thought she'd declared the end of us, that I would bend, argue, or beg. Instead, I had started to vanish from her life piece by piece, in ways she couldn't control. And I knew, as I stared into the darkness, that soon she'd feel the shift. The panic would come. The cracks would show. She just didn't know it yet. And when it did, I wouldn't raise my voice. I wouldn't explain. I'd just keep doing exactly what I'd started that morning, pulling every thread of affection out of her world until she realized she had unraveled it herself. The second morning was quieter than the first. She came into the kitchen expecting the usual, her coffee waiting, a quick kiss before I left. Instead, she found me sitting at the table alone, scrolling through the news on my phone, already finished with breakfast. I didn't look up when she entered. I didn't ask if she slept well. I didn't ask if she wanted coffee. The silence stretched, heavy and deliberate. She tried to fill it with casual small talk, but my only response was a nod. Then I stood, rinsed my mug, and walked out the door without another word. At work, I stayed late. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. The air in the office felt lighter than the air at home. When I finally walked in hours later, she was sitting on the couch in one of those robes she hadn't worn in months. A glass of wine half full on the table, her hair curled like she had been preparing for something. She looked up and said I was late, her tone rehearsed, almost playful. I told her I didn't realize we were on a clock. Her expression faltered for just a second before she forced a smile and turned back toward the TV. I walked past her, cleaned the mess she'd left in the kitchen, and went upstairs without another word. The next evening, she tried again. I came home to the smell of pasta cooking. A candle lit in the middle of the table. It was almost laughable, like a stage set for a scene she thought she could direct. I sat down, ate quietly, thanked her when I was finished, and pushed back from the table. When she reached across, brushing her fingers lightly against mine, I pulled my hand back as though I hadn't even noticed. Her face froze, then shifted quickly into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I stood and went upstairs, leaving her alone with her perfect dinner and her carefully placed candlelight. By the fourth day, she was testing me with little messages during the day. Hope your morning's going okay. What do you want for dinner? Miss you. I didn't ignore her, but I didn't feed her either. My replies were clean cuts. Thanks. Doesn't matter. All good. Words stripped down to the bone. She was used to me filling silence, carrying weight, making effort. Now every word was a mirror, showing her exactly what she had carved out of me over the years. That night, she sat beside me on the couch, closer than she had in months, scrolling through her phone but not really watching the screen. I could feel her eyes flicking toward me, waiting for me to break. I didn't. I stayed still, calm, a shadow she couldn't touch anymore. And in that silence, I realized something. She wasn't worried about me leaving. She was terrified of me staying, but not being hers anymore. And that was only the beginning. I knew the exact moment the shift began. It wasn't dramatic. No screaming. No accusations. It was smaller than that, almost invisible. She called me at work. She never did that unless something was wrong. Her voice was lighter than usual, forced. She said she just wanted to hear my voice. I let the silence stretch long enough for her to stumble into a nervous laugh before I asked if everything was okay. She said yes, she just missed me. I didn't say it back. I ended the call with a steady tone, left her hanging, and slipped my phone back into my pocket. For the first time, she was reaching for me, and I wasn't there. That night, I came home later than usual. I took my time at the gym, took the long route back, even sat in the car for a while before stepping into the house. She was waiting in the living room, dressed like we had dinner plans, though we didn't. Her hair curled, makeup done, a new dress I hadn't seen before. She said she'd been thinking we could try a new restaurant, maybe just talk. I told her I'd already eaten. She masked the flicker of disappointment, nodded quickly, and said maybe tomorrow. I went upstairs without another word, leaving her there with her perfect outfit and her wasted plan. The next morning, I adjusted the accounts. Quiet moves, nothing she'd notice right away. A portion of my paycheck rerouted to a private account. Subscriptions she didn't even know I was paying for canceled with a few clicks. By the time she tried to log into Netflix that night and saw the error, I was upstairs, showered, already in bed. She sighed loudly from the living room, calling out that something was wrong with the account. I didn't answer. She waited, but I stayed silent. She fixed nothing. She always assumed I would. Now, she was learning what it felt like when I stopped. Over the next few days, I noticed her eyes following me more closely. She started asking where I'd been, who I was with. I answered with calm indifference. Just people. She froze at that word, tried to read my face, but I gave her nothing. She used to thrive on being the one in control, withholding affection on her terms. Now she was tasting her own medicine, and it was bitter. The first crack showed when I caught her going through my laundry one evening. She pretended to fold shirts that didn't need folding, but her eyes flicked to receipts in my pockets. I didn't call her out. I let her wonder. That uncertainty was louder than any confrontation. She had said she wasn't in love. I believed her. But what she hadn't realized was how quickly indifference can turn into absence. And absence, that was something she had never prepared for. Her panic revealed itself in subtle ways at first. I noticed her voice rising an octave when she spoke to me, as if cheerfulness could mask the unease in her eyes. She began leaving her phone face down on the table, screen locked tight, but glancing at mine whenever she thought I wasn't looking. The same woman who once said she wasn't in love with me now watched me like a possession she feared losing. That irony wasn't lost on me. One night, I came home later than usual. I could tell she'd been waiting. The living room was spotless, the lights dimmed, soft music playing in the background like she was trying to rewind time to a version of us that no longer existed. She asked if I wanted to watch something together, her tone almost pleading. I shook my head, said I was tired, and walked upstairs. I heard the click of her wine glass setting back down, sharper than she intended. The following morning, she was already in the kitchen before me, something that hadn't happened in years. She poured me coffee without asking, slid the mug across the counter like it was a peace offering. I took a sip, thanked her politely, then left without another word. Her face fell, but she tried to hold it together. She wasn't used to polite distance. She was used to passion, whether it came in the form of affection or conflict. Now she had neither, and the emptiness was starting to choke her. That weekend, I saw her attempt to reclaim control. She dressed up in a way that screamed effort. Tight dress, full makeup, perfume clouding the air. She announced she had plans with friends, said she wouldn't be home until late. I nodded once, told her to have a good time, and went back to what I was doing. She paused at the door longer than necessary, waiting for a question I never asked. When she came back past midnight, she found me asleep, untouched, indifferent. The next day, she tried a different tactic. She lingered in the hallway while I packed a gym bag, asking casually if I was meeting someone. I told her no, just people, the same phrase I'd used before. Her lips tightened. She hated the ambiguity, hated not being the one holding the answers. She followed me to the door, but I didn't look back. Later that evening, I noticed she'd rearranged the photos in the living room. Pictures of us that had once been central were moved to the side, replaced by solo shots of her. It was a weak attempt at rewriting the story, making herself the center again. But the truth was, the moment she admitted she wasn't in love, the story had already changed. She thought she could fix it with control, with effort, with performance. What she didn't realize was that none of it mattered anymore. The man she was trying to win back wasn't there. He had already started walking away in silence, one step at a time. The first time she broke was almost imperceptible. It was a Wednesday night, and I came home later than usual. She was pacing in the kitchen, wiping down counters that were already clean, a nervous habit she'd never shown before. When I walked in, she tried to play it off, asking if I wanted to sit down for a drink. 2 glasses of wine were already poured on the table, waiting. I glanced at them, then at her, and told her I was heading to bed. I didn't raise my voice, didn't make a scene, just turned and left. Behind me, I heard the clink of glass as she picked one up, her breathing unsteady. The next morning, she tried again. She brushed against my arm as I passed by, the first time in weeks she had initiated touch. I flinched, just enough for her to feel it. She pulled back like she'd touched fire, her face tightening with something she didn't want me to see. Fear. For the first time, she realized I wasn't hers anymore, and maybe never would be again. Over the next few days, her mask began to slip. She started asking questions she once thought beneath her. Where was I going? Who was I with? Why was I late? Each time, I answered calmly, without detail. Just people. Just things. Nothing more. Her silence afterward was heavier than any argument could have been. She wasn't used to fighting shadows, and that's all I'd become to her. A shape she couldn't control, couldn't predict, couldn't pin down. By the weekend, the desperation bled through. She sat across from me at the table, her eyes fixed, her voice trembling under forced calm. She said she felt like I was slipping away. I nodded once and continued eating. No reassurance. No denial. Just the truth written on my silence. She leaned back in her chair, and I could see her eyes glisten before she looked away. She'd been the one to declare she wasn't in love, but now she was the one afraid of what it meant to lose me. That night, she climbed into bed later than me, thinking I was asleep. She lay on her back, staring at the ceiling, her breathing uneven. I could feel her shifting beside me, restless, searching for the warmth she had dismissed so easily before. I stayed still, calm, untouchable. She didn't know it yet, but this was only the beginning of her unraveling. She thought she could choose when to love me, when to push me away, when to reel me back in. But she was about to learn what it meant when the choice was no longer hers. By the 6th week, her desperation was no longer subtle. It seeped into every corner of the house, into every glance, every forced laugh, every carefully arranged evening she thought might bring me back. She started cooking meals she hadn't made in years, elaborate spreads with candles and music. She wore the dresses she used to wear on our dates, sprayed the perfume she knew I liked. I thanked her politely, ate in silence, and left the table as soon as I was done. The smile she forced stayed on her face, but her eyes told another story, one of panic, of a woman realizing her tricks no longer worked. She tried flattery next. She told me she noticed I'd been working out, said I looked stronger, sharper. I nodded, said nothing, and went on with my evening. The silence cut deeper than any rejection could. She wanted me to argue, to engage, to show even a flicker of interest, whether good or bad. But I gave her nothing, just calm detachment. One evening, I walked into the living room and found her scrolling through her phone, but she set it down quickly when she saw me. She leaned forward, asked if I wanted to watch a movie together. I told her I had other things to do. Her face cracked for the first time, her smile slipping before she caught herself. She said it was fine, maybe another time. I nodded and left the room. That night, I heard her crying softly in the bathroom with the water running, like she thought the sound would hide her unraveling. The next morning, she woke before me, something that hadn't happened in years. She brought me coffee to the table, placed it down gently, and waited. I thanked her, drank it slowly, and kept reading the news on my phone. She lingered there, waiting for more, but I never looked up. She finally walked away, shoulders tense, her silence heavier than her words had ever been. By the end of that week, she was trying everything: compliments, dinners, casual touches, half-hearted jokes. I remained the same: calm, polite, untouchable. She thought love was something she could withdraw and return at will, like a weapon she could wield. But now she was standing in the ruins of her own design, realizing the man she thought she controlled was gone. And the cruelest part? I didn't need to yell. I didn't need to fight. All I had to do was nothing. Silence had become my sharpest weapon. By the 7th week, the cracks were no longer cracks. They were fractures running through her carefully controlled mask. She began snapping at small things, the kind of irritation that once rolled off her tongue with practiced confidence, but now carried an edge of panic. She asked why I hadn't answered her text at lunch. I told her I'd been busy. She pressed again, saying she thought we were drifting apart. I looked at her calmly and said nothing. The silence gutted her more than any words could. That evening, she tried again, but this time her tone slipped. She accused me of being distant, of acting cold. The irony hung in the air like smoke. She had built this distance, brick by brick, over years of neglect and arrogance. Now, watching her choke on it was almost surreal. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't defend myself. I simply nodded, walked past her, and went upstairs. I heard the slam of a cabinet door behind me, the first real sign that she was unraveling. 2 nights later, I came home from the gym later than usual. She was waiting, not with dinner or wine, but with anger barely disguised as desperation. She said she didn't recognize me anymore, that I wasn't the man she married. I met her eyes and held them for a moment before answering quietly that maybe she never knew me to begin with. Her face paled, her breath caught, and for the first time in years, she had no reply. That silence lingered for the rest of the night. She paced around the living room while I sat calmly, scrolling through my phone, detached. She wanted me to break, to show emotion, to give her something she could work with. But I stayed still, my calm a wall she couldn't climb. Eventually, she disappeared into the bedroom and closed the door. I stayed downstairs, letting her sit in the silence she had once forced on me. The next morning, she tried to smooth it over, cooking breakfast as if nothing had happened. She placed a plate in front of me, waiting for acknowledgement. I thanked her politely, ate in silence, and left the house early. Her eyes followed me to the door, wide with a fear she was trying to disguise. She was finally realizing that indifference was worse than anger, and she was drowning in it. She had told me she wasn't in love. I believed her, but what she hadn't considered was what it would feel like when I stopped loving back, not with rage, not with tears, but with nothing at all. Her panic finally broke through the surface one Friday night. I came home later than usual, and she was waiting in the living room, her face pale, her eyes restless. She asked if we could talk. Her voice trembled, and for the first time in years, she didn't sound like the woman who used to control every word between us. She sounded small. She admitted she felt me slipping away, that she was scared. I listened in silence, nodded once, and walked past her. The weight of my calm crushed her more than any confrontation could have. That night, she followed me upstairs, hovering in the doorway as I changed for bed. She said she knew she had made mistakes, that maybe she had been careless. Her words spilled out like a confession, but they landed flat against the wall of my indifference. I told her I was tired and climbed into bed. She lingered for a moment, then slipped under the covers beside me. For the first time in years, she tried to curl closer, searching for warmth. I stayed still, unyielding, and eventually she rolled back to her side, her breathing uneven. The next morning, she shifted tactics. She made breakfast, dressed up, and even suggested we go out together. She smiled too much, laughed at things that weren't funny, her every gesture screaming effort. I matched it with calm politeness, never hostility, just distance. The more she tried, the more obvious it became, her control was gone. She was chasing, and I wasn't running. Over the next few days, she sent me messages during work hours, more frequent than ever. Short apologies, reminders of old memories, even a picture of us from years ago, captioned with a heart. I replied with the same precision as always. Thanks. Nice. All good. Nothing more. Each response stripped away her illusions piece by piece, until she began to see what I already knew. Love couldn't be turned on and off like a switch. By midweek, she broke again. She cornered me in the kitchen, tears in her eyes, saying she didn't want to lose me. The words were raw, unpolished, nothing like the woman who once said she wasn't in love. I didn't comfort her. I didn't reach out. I simply looked at her and walked away. Her sobs followed me down the hallway, echoing in the silence I left behind. That was the moment she realized the truth. She had finally lost control, and the man who once begged for her affection no longer existed. By the 9th week, her desperation no longer hid behind words. It had become visible in every action, every nervous glance, every forced smile. One evening, I walked into the living room and found her dressed like we were going to a gala, makeup flawless, hair curled, candles lit. She had set the table for two, a 3-course meal waiting. I sat down, ate quietly, thanked her for the effort, and then stood up without touching the wine she had poured. She stared at me as if she'd just watched her last hope dissolve right in front of her. The next day, she tried something different. She waited outside the gym for me, leaning against her car like she hadn't been caught in years doing anything so transparent. She smiled when she saw me, but the smile cracked as soon as I passed her without stopping. She called my name once, but I kept walking. When I got home, she was already there, pacing in the kitchen, her face pale with frustration. She asked if I was seeing someone else. I looked at her calmly, said nothing, and walked past. Her voice broke as she repeated the question, louder this time, but I closed the bedroom door behind me, leaving her to drown in the silence. That weekend, she tried another tactic, nostalgia. She pulled out old photo albums, laid them on the coffee table, flipping through them like she could summon the past back into the present. She pointed out vacations, anniversaries, the first apartment we shared. I glanced at the pages, nodded once, and stood up to leave. She stared at the pictures alone, her hands trembling as she realized the man in those photographs wasn't sitting across from her anymore. By Sunday night, her panic had curdled into something raw. She cornered me in the hallway, tears streaking her face, saying she didn't know who she was without me. Her voice cracked as she admitted she felt empty, scared, lost. I listened without interrupting, then gently stepped around her and walked away. She followed me with her eyes, broken, waiting for some sign of warmth. But there was none left to give. She had once told me she wasn't in love. At the time, she thought it was power. Now, with every desperate move, she was realizing what it truly meant. It wasn't just a phrase. It was a sentence, and the silence that followed it had become her punishment. The final break didn't come with shouting or drama. It came in silence, as it always had. One morning, I woke before her, packed a single bag, and stood in the doorway of the bedroom watching her sleep. She looked restless, her face tense even in dreams. The woman who once told me she wasn't in love now lay in the bed of her own making, and for the first time, I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, just clarity. I walked through the house one last time. The flowers I once brought her, gone. The surprises, the affection, erased. Every reminder of me had been stripped away, replaced with an emptiness she had tried and failed to fill. I left the keys on the counter, placed my wedding band beside them, and closed the front door behind me. Later that day, my phone lit up with her messages. First casual, then frantic. She asked where I was, when I'd be back, if we could talk. I didn't respond. By evening, the call started. Her voice grew more desperate with every voicemail, breaking down into sobs and apologies, words she never thought she would say. I listened to none of them. I deleted each one without a trace. That night, I stayed in a quiet apartment I had already prepared. The fridge was stocked, the bed was made, and the silence felt like peace, not punishment. I sat by the window, sipping a drink, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. For the first time in years, I felt weightless, untethered. She was no longer my problem, no longer my anchor. She was just a chapter one had closed without a sound. Days turned into weeks. I didn't go back. She sent long messages filled with regret, confessions, promises to change. She even showed up at my office once, waiting in the parking lot, her eyes swollen from crying. I walked past her without a word, climbed into my car, and drove away. That was the last time I saw her. She had once thought she could choose when to love me, when to push me away, when to pull me back. But by the time she realized love isn't a switch you can flip, it was too late. She had already lost me. Not to another woman, not to betrayal, but to silence. And that silence was louder than anything I could have ever said. Support the channel by liking, commenting, and subscribing. I promise even more interesting stories.